Did you know that one of the most beautiful snow-covered mountain villages, a place once known for peace and escape, became the hunting ground of a serial killer? Families arrived for vacations, stayed in cozy wooden cabins, and vanished overnight. By morning, their bodies were found tied with ropes, arranged in scenes so disturbing they looked ritualistic. What made it terrifying wasn't just the murders, but how calm the killer was. He broke in at night, tied everyone up, cooked himself a meal inside their cabin, ate slowly, robbed them of money and gold, and only then ended their lives. Police blocked roads, searched every house, even sealed off the valley, yet he struck again and again, leaving no trace. Locals whispered this wasn't a man at all, but a ghost moving through the snow unseen. The truth, when it came out, was darker than anyone imagined. The village lay deep in the mountains, surrounded by endless forests and snow that glittered under the moonlight. To outsiders, it looked perfect. Wooden cabins with smoke curling from chimneys, frozen lakes where children played, silence that felt untouched by time. Families booked stays months ahead, dreaming of quiet nights by the fireplace, but the same silence that comforted them was the silence. The killer used to stalk them. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Families checked in smiling, taking photos, ready to enjoy the beauty. Then overnight, everything changed. Neighbors noticed no lights the next morning, no movement. When police broke in, what they found inside froze them more than the snow. Outside, bodies tied neatly with ropes, positioned with disturbing intent. The killer hadn't just murdered. He staged a scene. The strangest detail was the calmness. On tables, half-eaten meals sat untouched. Food the killer had cooked and eaten, while his victims were bound and helpless. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't rushed. It was patient, deliberate, repeated with every case. Word spread fast. By the second family, panic gripped the valley. Police set up roadblocks, warning signs, checkpoints. Locals locked their doors earlier than ever before. But fear didn't stop him. Days later, another family disappeared. And when their cabin door was forced open, the same chilling scene awaited: ropes, silence, and death. People began to wonder how someone could move so freely in a place where fresh snow revealed every footprint. How could entire families be tied, controlled, and silenced without a single cry reaching the neighbors? And most unsettling of all, why did the killer linger long enough to cook and eat while his victims sat there, watching the clock tick toward their final moments? The answers were nowhere in sight. And with each passing day, it became clear. This wasn't random. It wasn't desperate. It was a twisted idea of control repeated again and again, until the village itself became a graveyard buried in snow. It all began with one family, a couple with 2 children eager to spend a weekend away from the city. They checked into a cabin on the edge of the valley, posting cheerful photos of the snow and the crackling fireplace. To everyone else, it looked like the perfect getaway, but by the very next morning, everything had changed. When the cabin windows stayed dark long after sunrise, the caretaker grew uneasy. He knocked on the door, no answer. Hours passed and still no sound came from inside. Finally, police were called. What they found when they forced the door open marked the beginning of a nightmare. The scene was eerily quiet. The air carried the smell of cooked food, yet the table was set for more than one. In the living room, the family lay bound tightly with ropes, their lifeless eyes staring into nothingness. The chair suggested they had been forced to sit and watch. On the kitchen counter, dishes showed clear signs that someone had prepared and eaten a full meal. And suddenly, investigators realized this wasn't the work of one man. There had been multiple killers inside this cabin. That detail made everything far more chilling. This wasn't a lone predator moving quietly through the snow. This was a group, organized enough to restrain an entire family without a single scream escaping into the night. One cooked, one looted, others kept watch. And when they were done, they murdered with precision that spoke of planning, not impulse. For investigators, nothing made sense. Why would 4 men linger inside a stranger's cabin, eating calmly while a family sat tied and helpless? Why risk so much time at the scene? And how could 4 people vanish into the snowy night without leaving a single footprint? The case shocked the valley. Tourists canceled their stays. Locals whispered that no ordinary humans could commit something like this. But fear turned into horror when just days later, another family was found. Different cabin, same pattern, 4 killers. Same ritual of food, robbery, and cold-blooded murder. It was no longer a question of who did this, but how a group of men could move unseen, strike so perfectly, and disappear as if the mountains themselves were protecting them. The cabin crime scene shook everyone, But for the police, it was a puzzle that made no sense. They studied every inch of the snow outside, expecting footprints, drag marks, or tire tracks, but found nothing. The snow was clean, untouched, as though the killers had vanished into thin air. Inside, the forensic team collected the ropes, the dishes, and the fingerprints from the table. Yet every print belonged only to the family. It was as if whoever had done this knew exactly how to erase their presence. Investigators interviewed locals, searching for anyone who had seen strangers in the valley that night. But there were no reports of suspicious vehicles. No one knocking at doors, no noise in the woods. Whoever these killers were, they moved like shadows, invisible yet precise. Even the way the family was tied spoke of training. The ropes wound in perfect knots, identical on each victim, suggesting that more than one person had done the binding. Despite the effort, the police had no leads. They reassured the villagers it was an isolated case, a robbery gone wrong, and urged everyone to remain calm. Patrols were set up, roadblocks placed at the valley entrances, and officers spent nights combing through the snow with flashlights. But then only a few days later, the nightmare repeated. This time it was a different cabin, a different family, yet the same ritual unfolded. The curtain stayed drawn in the morning. Neighbors grew concerned, and when the police broke down the door, they were met with an almost identical scene. A family tied with ropes, valuables missing, and the chilling detail that made every officer's blood run cold. The kitchen showed signs of a freshly prepared meal, plates with food scraps, a pan still warm, as if someone had been cooking just an hour earlier. The precision, the patience, and the cruelty mirrored the first case exactly. This was no random crime. It was a pattern, and more terrifying than that, it was proof that the killers were still inside the valley, watching, waiting, and confident enough to strike again despite the heavy police presence. Whispers spread quickly. If the police couldn't catch them, who could? And if two families could vanish this way, how many more would follow before the killers were unmasked? By the time the second family was buried, the valley had transformed into a place of fear. Police checkpoints lined every road, officers patrolled with dogs, and helicopters circled above the snow-covered peaks. Locals were told to keep their doors locked, never travel alone at night, and report anything unusual immediately. But the killers were already 2 steps ahead. Despite the heightened security, the third murder happened with terrifying ease. A family of 5 had rented a cabin deeper in the woods, farther from the village center. They were last seen enjoying dinner, their laughter echoing across the frosted trees. But by morning, silence had replaced the warmth. When officers broke in, the sight inside froze them where they stood. The ropes, the arrangement of bodies, the stolen valuables, and all identical to the earlier crimes. But this time, something new sent chills through the investigation. On the dining table lay 5 half-empty cups, as if the killers had sat with the family, drinking alongside them before carrying out their ritual. Whoever they weren't just murdering, though they were taunting, showing they could take as much time as they wanted without being caught. Panic spread like wildfire. Tourists fled the valley, hotels shut their doors, and locals began arming themselves, convinced that ordinary police could do nothing against whoever was hiding among them. The mystery only deepened when officers noticed that every cabin attacked was perfectly chosen, isolated, difficult to reach quickly, and always surrounded by thick snow that erased any trace of movement. Then came the 4th strike, the boldest yet. This time, the killers targeted a family staying in a cabin dangerously close to the main road, less than half a mile from a police checkpoint. The family was heard laughing late into the evening, music playing through the wooden walls, but by dawn the sound had vanished. When police rushed in, they found the same horrific pattern. Ropes, stolen valuables, a meal prepared and eaten. But in this case, the food was still warm, steam rising from the dishes as officers entered. The killers had been there just minutes earlier, slipping away unseen, right under police watch. It was no longer just murder. It was a message, a game. And the killers were winning. The 4th murder shook the police to their core. If the killers could strike within walking distance of a checkpoint, then nowhere was safe. Pressure from the media and the government mounted, demanding answers, demanding arrests. Dozens of officers were deployed from nearby cities, and the valley, once known for its beauty, now looked like a war zone of patrol cars, armed guards, and barricades. Investigators began combing through every detail of the crime scenes. They noticed patterns, the same type of rope used each time, the same meticulous knots, the same choice of victims. families who had recently checked in, almost as if someone knew exactly who had arrived and where they were staying. That detail pointed to an insider, someone local, maybe even someone working in the tourism business. Suspicion quickly fell on the caretakers of the cabins, the very people entrusted with welcoming tourists. One man was brought in for questioning after a guest recalled how he asked strange questions about their schedule. Another was suspected because his footprints were found near one of the crime scenes. But each time the evidence crumbled. Alibis checked out. Prints belonged to residents who had reason to be there. The killers remained invisible. Out of desperation, police tried something bold: bait. They planted plainclothes officers in cabins, staging families with children, setting up hidden cameras and motion sensors. Roads were monitored, phone lines tapped, and helicopters kept circling through the night. For weeks, nothing happened. No break-ins, no strange movements, no shadows in the snow. And then, just when security was quietly being scaled back, they struck. But this time, the killers walked straight into the trap. Hidden cameras picked up figures moving silently through the snow. 4 of them, dressed in dark coats, their faces covered, carrying ropes and knives. They slipped into the cabin where an undercover family was waiting. The officers inside held their breath, pretending to sleep as the killers crept closer. Then, a signal. Doors burst open. Armed units swarmed in. For the first time, the hunters had been cornered. But what happened next stunned everyone. The cabin erupted in chaos. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Commands were shouted and gunshots cracked the silence of the valley. 2 of the killers froze instantly, stunned and cornered. Another tried to fight back, swinging a knife wildly before being dragged down. But the 4th, the one who seemed to lead them, slipped out through the back window into the snowstorm. Police scrambled after him, but the blizzard swallowed everything. Visibility was only a few feet. Footsteps vanished within minutes, and the leader was gone as if the mountain itself had taken him in. When the storm cleared hours later, only 3 men sat cuffed in the patrol station, their faces hidden in shadows, refusing to speak a word. At first, investigators thought the nightmare was over, but as they dug deeper, a disturbing truth emerged. The 3 arrested were not outsiders. They were locals, men who had grown up in the valley, working in the very cabins they turned into slaughterhouses. Their motive? Money. They admitted to targeting tourists, robbing them, and following the instructions of the 4th man, the one they called only the Master. Every rope, every knot, every brutal detail, all of it was his design. He had trained them, controlled them, promised them riches, and demanded absolute obedience. The men swore they never saw his real face. He always wore a mask, always gave orders in whispers, always appeared and vanished like a ghost. The revelation shocked the community. The murders weren't random. They were a ritual carried out under the command of a man no one could identify. And worse, he was still out there. Police launched the largest manhunt the valley had ever seen. Helicopters searched the peaks. Dogs tracked scents through the snow, and checkpoints turned every road into a fortress. But the Master was never found. Some said he froze to death in the storm that night. Others believed he walked across the mountains into another valley ready to strike again. And then came the final twist. Weeks later, a cabin owner cleaning up the abandoned tourist houses found something etched deep into a wooden beam near the fireplace. 4 chilling words, carved with a blade. I am still here. To this day, no one knows who the Master really was. A man, a ghost, or something darker. But in that valley, even now, locals whisper that the snow carries secrets, and that one day, he will return.